Hi, my name is Faith Melody, and in today's class, I'll be introducing to you guys modifiers in Cinema4D. I'm going to go over various common modifiers in Cinema4D. I'm going to show you what they do and how to use them. So, if you are interested in learning Cinema4D, I released a course on the complete beginner tutorial series for Cinema4D, and it is completely free. This will take you through the basics you need to know to get your feel around Cinema4D, and you can find a link to the course in the description below. I look forward to seeing you there. Right off the bat, you can find the modifiers tab on the right hand panel in Cinema4D. Here is the modifiers tab. If you left click and hold, you'll see a list or multiple modifiers in Cinema4D. So I'm going to go through a handful of them, and by the end of this class, you should have a good understanding on how to use a lot of the modifiers in Cinema4D. Right off the bat, you will see the subdivision surface modifier. In Cinema4D, when it comes to modifiers, the hierarchy system of modifiers is above what you are trying to apply it on. Unlike deformers that you add your geometry, then you add the deformer under your geometry for it to have an effect. With modifiers, you add the modifier, then you add your geometry under the modifier for it to have an effect. So we're starting with the subdivision surface modifier. The subdivision surface modifier is a conventional tool in 3D which divides your polygon and smoothens it at the same time. So we are going to start by adding a cube, then drag it under the subdivision surface modifier. Right off the bat, we see it have an effect, whereby when you click on the subdivision surface modifier, it has its attributes. And in the attribute manager, you see you have the type, the subdivision viewport, subdivision, render, subdivide UV, and linear pre-subdivision. I'm going to explain what all this means. For the type, you don't really need to tamper with any of this. This just shows the algorithm it uses to subdivide your geometry. When you change the algorithm, you might notice some changes and you might not notice any of the changes. Now let's begin with type. For the majority of your 3D workflow, what you need to concern yourself is the Catmull Clark N-gun and the open subdivide bilinear. This is responsible for subdividing and smoothing your subdivision. When you change it over to the open subdivide bilinear, it subdivides your geometry, but it doesn't smoothen it. So now if I go ahead and disable the modifier, you can see that it divided it into various polygons, but it didn't smoothen it. But if I change it from open subdivide to Catmull Clark N-gun, it will subdivide it, which is adding more geometry and is also smoothing it at the same time. Now, the subdivision viewport shows how much subdivision do you want. So if I set it to 0, we have our original geometry. If I set it to 1, it's subdivided by 1 iteration. If I set it to 2, it's subdivided by 2 iterations. So the amount of subdivision I give to it, it gets smoother and more geometry is added. Alright. Same goes for the subdivision render. The difference is that this affects your viewport only. So if you want to ensure that what you are doing in the viewport also shows up when you're rendering it out, you must make your viewport and your render have the same value. Now, subdivide UVs, these come into play when you are working with a textured geometry. In this scene, we have our table model here, and I'm going to add in the subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to put the model under it. Now you see, it has been divided. But also, you can notice some stretching at the edges here. So this is determined by how the subdivision modifier processes UVs. So these settings just determine how subsurface modifier processes subdividing UVs. So with this, you can visualize how the subdivision modifier is processing UVs. Then we now have our linear pre-subdivision. What does this do? This applies a layer of subdivision before adding the subdivision in the viewport. And let me explain how this works. I'm going to add a new cube. Right now, the reason why this cube gets converted into a sphere when we add the subdivision is because there are no vertices to determine how the geometry should look like. Let me show you what I mean. If I add the subdivision surface modifier, then I click on my cube. While selecting my cube, right click it, make editable. I can go into the edit mode, into the edge selection mode. Then using my loop cut tool, add in a loop cut here, 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 and here. And now we have our cube with beveled edges. Essentially, this is what the linear pre-subdivision does. This is the best way I can explain it. I'm going to add in the cube, then add in a subdivision surface modifier, drag the cube to it. Now, I'm going to set this to open subdivision bilinear. So right now, this is my first subdivision layer. Then, my second subdivision layer, I'm going to add these 2 under it. Now, everything is smoothing, but it's not smoothing into a circle as we previously saw. So now, this is the pre-subdivision layer and this is the subdivision after that, which now gives us the exact same result. Alright, so that is that about the subdivision surface modifier. So next, we have our clothed surface modifier. What does our clothed surface modifier do? Just extrude geometry all around. Alright, so I'm going to show you when this modifier comes into play. I'm going to add the clothed surface modifier, then put my plane under it. This automatically subdivides my geometry, then it allows me to add thickness to my geometry, sort of like the extrude, but for everything. Now, what's the use case for this modifier? Let me show you an example. So I'm going to quickly run a simulation. This particular cloth is a bit blocky because there's not enough geometry. So there are two ways to go about this. I can either add in more geometry, or I can just very simply add in my cloth surface modifier, then drag my plane under it. So it will smoothen the cloth and allow me to give the cloth some thickness, all without requiring more simulation computation. So this can play smoothly. So here is a use case for the cloth surface modifier. Alright, so now we have the extrude, loft, and sweep modifier. These modifiers are modifiers that affect only spline, and I'm going to show you how to use it. So I'm going to begin with the extrude modifier. I'm going to begin by adding in a spline, and this time it's going to be the rectangle spline. I'm going to add it to my scene. Now we have this. I'm going to add in the extrude modifier and put the rectangle under the extrude modifier. Now it has extruded the spline into a geometry, and I can control the offset of this spline from the attribute of the extrude modifier. I can also increase the subdivision. Remember, in 3D, whenever you hear the word subdivision, it means adding in geometry. So I can also increase the subdivision. I can decide to adjust the caps in the cap menu here and disable start cap and end cap. This allows it to be hollow. I can just enable the start cap so it's hollow on one end. There are many other micro tweaks you can make, but this is the basic overview of the extrude modifier. Next, we have the lathe modifier. What does this do? The best way to visualize it is by adding in the arc spline. I'm going to add in the arc. Now, lathe, like the way potters work, it will extrude it round about the point of origin. So here is the point of origin. Now, when I drag the arc under the lathe, it has extruded it around the point of origin. So this is an easy way to create a bowl geometry. So I can rotate this 360 or 180 rather, and drag it up. So now we have our bowl geometry, all from using the arc and the lathe. So this way, if you want to model a bottle, what you have to do is use the spline to draw out one side, then use the lathe to extrude it around. We'll be doing that very soon. Next, we have the loft. The loft is similar to the extrude, but unlike the extrude, it allows you to transition between two different splines. Let me show you how it works. I'm going to add in the rectangle, and I'm going to add in the circle. I'm going to move the circle forward. Alright, so the loft will extrude the rectangle into the circle. Now let me visualize it. So I'm going to add in the rectangle, then add in the circle under it, and now you can see it in action. This is so cool because it is completely procedural, and that is where Cinema4D shines in, especially for motion graphics. This is so cool because I can animate this. I can move it around without it being permanent. I can rotate it, I can adjust the rectangle and move it however I want. Unlike the extrude tool, I can adjust the caps, the start cap and the end cap, and make it hollow. I can adjust the tessellation if I want it to be an end gun, or a regular grid. And same with the extrude modifier, I can also add in more subdivisions. Remember, subdivision means adding in more geometry. That is that for the loft. Now we have the sweep. The sweep, similar to the loft, but this time it doesn't transition from one spline to the other. It extrudes a spline through a path. How does that work? I'm going to add a path, and this time around it will be a helix. Now, a helix has various properties. This is the spline. It has various properties. So this time around, I'm going to increase the start radius. I'm going to increase the end radius to a random amount. And I'm going to increase the height. So now, this is our helix. And I'm going to add in another spline. And this time I'm going to add in the circle. And I'm going to extrude the circle around this part. To do that, I add in my circle under the sweep. Then I add in the helix under the circle. Now, pay attention to the hierarchy system, like I explained in the previous lesson. I did not make the helix a child of the circle. I placed the helix under the circle, but it is still a child of the sweep modifier. So both the circle and the helix are both children of the sweep. That is the only way these arrangements can work. If you put anything under the circle, the sweep will treat these two as one object. Then you have to add in another object that will do the sweeping. So now the circle is being extruded around the helix. And this is beautiful because there are lots of parameters you can do with this way. So now this has a lot of geometry. You cannot adjust the geometry from the modifier itself. You adjust it from the spline by lowering the amount of points in the spline interpolation section. Alright, we have easily made a macaroni. This is a single macaroni. Now, next we have the Spline Max tool. The Spline Max tool, as the name implies. Alright, in our modifiers list, we have the Spline max modifier and we have the Boolean modifier. These two modifiers essentially they do the same, but one works for only geometry and one works for splines. And I'm going to show you how they work. So I'm going to start with the Boolean modifier. So let's go with my left click to add in the Boolean modifier to our scene. Then I'll add in two geometry. I'm going to add in a sphere and a cube. Now I'm going to move the cube to the side. What does the Boolean modifier do? It allows you to subtract or add two geometries together. So I can select these two geometry, then drag them under the Boolean tool. When I click on the Boolean tool in the attributes manager, I can select the kind of operation I want. I can use the union operation, the subtract operation, the intersect operation, and the without operation. And I'm going to show you what each of them do. The union operation allows you to join the two objects together. You cannot see it very well now, but if I go inside this object, you can see that the inside of the object is hollow. A better way to visualize it is if I change my display to line, you can see that where the sphere intersects with the cube is hollow. So they are fused together. If I click on the balloon, it selects the object as a whole, the single individual object. Now if I change it from union to subtract, it will subtract B from A. Now, this performs a subtract operation, subtracting the sphere from the cube. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that it is procedural. So I can move the cube as this is happening, which is beautiful. Now, the next thing is intersection. This only shows the intersection between the sphere and the cube. If they are not intersecting, it won't show it. So it splices it at the intersection point between the sphere and the cube. And if they are not intersecting, it will. Next, we have the without. The without is similar to the subtract, but this time it will subtract it without showing the intersection point and without showing the intersection point at which the sphere was subtracted from the cube. Let me change subtract. You see the point at which the sphere was cut out from the cube. Here it won't show it. That is without. Alright, so that is that for the Boolean tool. Now, this same goes for the spline tool, as you have different mode of operation when adding the spline mark. The subtract B from A, subtract B, B subtract A, and or an intersection. So where I can add in two different masks. I'm going to move the circle to the side. Then I'm going to click on two of them, then add them under the spline mark. Now the mode union has joined them. When I change it from union to subtract B from A, it cuts it at the point the rectangle interacts with the circle. If I change it the other way, it cuts it the other way. If I change it to and, this is the intersection point. The or, this shows the two of them here. So this is the sphere or the rectangle. So same goes for the other operation, but typically I make use of this often. Now the beautiful thing about Cinema4D is because this is procedural, I can do B from A, then add an extrude modifier and extrude the spline. Or I can add in a circle spline, move it forward, then add a loft. I'm going to add in the circle spline, then the entire spline max, I'm going to put it on that too. So this will extrude the entire spline max down to the circle. Isn't that great? Yeah, this doesn't look very good. And the wonderful thing is that because this is a geometry now, I can now add in a subdivision surface modifier to it. Go to add subdivision, then put it under the subdivision surface modifier. This is now where the power of Cinema4D now comes in. How you can combine things and make your tree very large. From there, we have connect. And let me show you how the connect modifier works. Here with me, I have 9 cubes. And I'm going to show you how the connect modifier works. Connect modifier doesn't do too much. Its job is just to link all the objects under it together. So I'm going to select all the cubes I have with me in this scene, and I'm going to drag them under the connect, and voila, the connect modifier has connected all of them together. When does this come in handy? This comes in handy when you want to send files out of Cinema4D and you want to send them as an Alembic file. So this is a tool that will come in handy for your Cinema4D journey. Now we have the thickening modifier. This modifier does the same thing as the cloth surface, but this time around, it gives you the ability to fine-tune what you want. So you're going to see the difference. In the thickening modifier, when I add in a plane this time around, and I drag the plane under it, you see the plane gets extruded. Now, I can adjust the thickness, adjust the position at which it is thickening it, adjust the subdivision, decide if I want the caps to show. This is something that the cloth surface modifier cannot do. I can decide if I only want the caps to show. I can add in a thickness map to tell it to be thicker in some places and lighter in some places. I can do it by adding a vertex map, and I can make use of polygon selection. How does that work? I'm just showing you an overview of what it can do. So the polygon selection in the thickening, I'm going to press C on my plane, convert it to an editable mesh. Now to demonstrate this polygon selection, now to tell you how much fine tuning we can do, I'm going to click on this plane, right click it, make it editable, go into the face selection and select some faces at random. Now I'm going to go into the tools, the select, then down here I'm going to click on store selection. This creates a tag. I will explain that. So now in the thickness, I'm going to enable this, then drag the tag into the polygon selection. Then boom, it only extrude places that I selected, and I can adjust how they extruded them. Then on top of this, I can add in a subdivision of modifier, then put a linear pre-subdivision. So look at the beauty we have created just with a few clicks. I know I'm doing things that I haven't introduced to you yet, but this is just to show you the cool things you can do. Alright, so the next modifier is the Symmetry modifier. This is a modifier that you will make use of very often. How does it work? If I add in a cube, then I right click, make it editable. Now this is an editable mesh. I can use KL to enable loop cut, then I'm going to divide it at this center. Now go to my selection tool, I'm going to select all the faces because I'm in face selection, then delete the face. So let's say I'm modeling something now. I can just model this half, then drag it under the symmetry tool. Then you have to click on the symmetry tool, then select the axis you are working with. So right now I'm working Z axis. Then it clones it on that axis. That is how the symmetry tool. So because it's procedural, I can just carry on my business and keep on extruding, scaling it down, and it does it. So I bring this down. So this is also KL. So let's say I'm modeling the character, then I press extrude it down, then extrude it downward again. Bring it to the side. So this is a very rough looking character, but extrude this upward, scale this in, bring it to the center. Then there are some settings you can tamper with in the symmetry. If I click on the symmetry tool, I can enable weld. This allows you to weld the center point here, so you don't have to be too precise with how does it stick. There's a margin of tolerance to the welding, so I can increase the margin of tolerance to a margin that I'm comfortable with. So now you see, I can increase to 1 centimeter. So 1 centimeter is okay. And I'm going to click on the cube, then move it a little bit to the side. So now it has welded. So all these points are welded. The beautiful thing about this is that you can convert them back into an editable mesh, and this also applies to all other modifiers. When I convert it to an editable mesh, it creates a null and put my cube under. So now this is the complete mesh now, and I will explain more on it down the line. Alright, so the next modifier in the line is instance modifier. This comes in handy when you're working with very large polygons. So we won't go into this on a beginner level, we'll go into this on an intermediate level. Then we have the array modifier. The array modifier just clones your object in an array pattern. If I add in a cube and I drag it under the array, clones my object around a circle. So I can increase the radius of the circle, then increase the amount of copies I want. So now I've made a gear tutu. So that is all. Then you can increase the amplitude, let me increase the radius a bit, then increase the frequency. For the frequency to show, you need to have a lot of polygons. So I can increase the amplitude and I can increase the frequency to 1. Once I do this, if I hit on the play button, the animation will cycle through. So this is a procedural animation, and this is what this modifier allows you to do. It's a cool thing that the modifier allows you to do. The modifier allows you to clone your object around the circle and distort the cloning process. Alright, that's done for that. Next we have the atom array. Now, this decimates your geometry. So I'm going to add in a sphere. So this sphere, I'm going to lower the segment of the sphere. So I'm going to drag it under the atom array so you can see what it does. So this adds cylinders and spheres to the edges and the vertices of the geometry, making it look like a skeleton of itself. So that's what atom array does. It's a very cool thing to play with. Then we have the remesh tool. This is a simple tool, but it's used in more advanced situations where you are working with a heavy geometry and you want to lower the density of the geometry, or you want to retopologize the geometry. That is the same thing that polygon reduction do. So we can visualize them actually. I'm going to add in a sphere. I'm going to increase the segment of the sphere. Now when I add in the remesh modifier, if I drag the sphere under it, it will remesh it. Now if you arrange topology, if I lower the mesh density, yeah, reduce the density of the geometry. So now you have seen what modifiers can do. I hope this gets you excited on the various ways you can combine this. So see you in the next class.